Okay, good morning. This is Richard Hsu, host of Hsu Untied. This morning, I'm very pleased to have with me as my guest Casey McCracken, who's a partner at Gibson Dunn. Casey, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Richard. Thanks for having me.
So, Casey, I've interviewed a lot of lawyers who were former scientists, but I always love when that particular science discipline is mathematics. So I'm super excited you're going to be on my program. Let me just ask you, well, why'd you choose math as a major to begin with?
I have always loved math all throughout, elementary school, middle school, high school. And when I got to college, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was interested in everything. But I knew I loved math, so I thought I'll take math classes.
And
And then
what is it about math that you liked, or can you articulate that specifically?
yeah, well, I mean, for one thing, I always had an aptitude for it. So I think that makes you just generally like things that you're better at in
Yeah.
general. But I also liked that there's always a right answer. And so I really appreciated that, as hard as it could be and as difficult as it is, when you're done and you finish your proof or you do your calculation, you can objectively determine whether that was right or not right.
Yeah.
Which is different from like an English class where you write something and somebody subjectively determines whether it was good or not.
Yeah.
So I really appreciated that about math, and I liked the logic of it. I liked kind of thinking through practical problems.
Mm. Now, in high school, I'm taking you took calculus much earlier than most people, or were you pretty advanced in your mathematics?
Yeah, well, from a young age, I had an opportunity at public schools in Irvine to get a couple grades ahead in
Uh-huh.
math, and and I kind of stayed that way throughout my educational career. And so by high school, I think junior year, I took calculus, the advanced version of that, and then was doing some linear algebra senior in high school. And yeah, and so by the time I got to college, had a little bit of a leg up, and I still enjoyed it and thought, hey, I should just keep taking these classes.
Now, what kind of classes did you take in college? Because now, you can get all kinds of interesting combinatorics and, what kinds of classes did you take in college?
I did take combinatorics. I took several analysis
Oh,
classes.
yeah.
I took classes on ring theory, some more linear algebra. And I took other stuff for fun. I took a class on math for elementary school teachers, which was a combination of, it's like how to teach math, but also how to teach math to young people in a way that instills sort of like high level mathematical concepts without them knowing that's what you're doing.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that was an interesting class.
Did you have to write any kind of thesis, or did you do any research in college? Math
I didn't
research?
do a thesis in math. I was also an economics major. I was like a math major first and economics also. I did do a thesis in economics. I wrote some papers in math, but not on like developing new math. It was more of, how to explain certain proofs and things like that.
Yeah. What's the hardest math class you think you took?
Gosh, so I will say that by the time I got to senior year and I was in classes with, people that used to be my teaching advisors, my TAs and other classes, I mean, I to some extent almost hit a wall where I was like, man, it takes me way longer to learn this than some of these other people who are here at Stanford or here at Stanford, like in the graduate school and are trying to get PhDs in math. Which is something I really empathize with because, growing up, that's how it was for other kids, right? They'd be like, why does Casey understand that so fast? And it takes me a while to learn it. And then I got to that point at some point where it was like, oh, these people are on another level from me. But the one class that sticks out was a class, I don't know what it was called, but we spent most of the class trying to prove the Black-Scholes model, which is a model for sort of approximating the stock market.
Yeah.
And I remember just being like, I don't know where I am and what's happening right now. And I made it through the class and I passed. I might have even gotten an A, but
You really had no
I
idea.
remember the guy next to me, was my good friend, was like, yeah, this makes total sense. And I was like, glad it does for you.
So up until that point, let's say, what were you thinking you were going to do with your life, or what was your career goals up until that point?
That's a great question. All throughout my life, people said, oh, you're going to be a lawyer. Not because they were telling me I should be a lawyer, but they thought based on my personality and my tendency to argue and my sense of justice, they
Oh, interesting.
thought you're probably going to be a lawyer. And I kind of thought that too. I thought that would be an interesting job,
Huh.
but I hadn't settled on it by any means. And I, throughout college, was just taking things that were interesting. At one point, I thought I wanted to be an astrophysicist.
Huh.
Um, but I always thought, okay, law school is, a reasonable option, and it doesn't really matter what I major in. I can always go to
Yeah.
law school. And so I tried other jobs throughout college. I tried an engineering job. I worked at a think tank in economics,
Huh.
and none of them really spoke to me. And I thought, you know what? I want to be a lawyer. I'll go to law school.
Oh, interesting. So you never thought about grad school in mathematics or anything like that, or professor? Because I mean, those would obviously be
No,
really logical career choices.
I never thought I would do a career in pure math.
Huh.
And I think for a few reasons. One is I think it would seem isolating. I mean, I
Mm,
really like collaboration.
mm,
And you do some of that in math, but a lot of it is, people are sitting in front of their
mm.
chalkboard just thinking really hard all day. And I do love thinking, but I like to do it with other people and I like to be collaborative. And I also like practical things, right? It was really fun in college to think about proofs and
Yeah.
think about real ring theory, but um, I would want to do something that applied that. Um, and I didn't really have a plan for how to do that.
Huh. So
Um,
you kind of applied to law school a little bit on a whim, or did you have any idea what kind of lawyer you were going to be or anything like that?
I wouldn't say it was a whim. People in my family were lawyers,
Mm,
and I thought I would really enjoy it. So it wasn't
mm.
on a whim. I applied, and by my senior or junior year of college, I was pretty sure I was going to apply to law school.
Yeah.
I was more eliminating other options, right? I
Okay.
tried out engineering to see, okay, is that something I want to do? No, 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 I'll be a lawyer. I'll try out economics. Yeah, that's fun, but no, I'd rather be a lawyer. So it wasn't on a whim. And then I didn't know what kind of lawyer I wanted to be, but once I got to law school, gosh, I just loved everything. Um, and even when I started to take a job at a firm, or as a summer associate, kind of interviewing with a firm, I didn't know if I wanted to be a litigator or a transactional attorney. They
Yeah,
both
yeah,
seemed amazing and
yeah,
fun.
yeah,
It wasn't until I clerked that I really solidified that I wanted to be a litigator and
yeah.
that I loved
Interesting.
trials.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And how did you like law school? I mean, compared to obviously, having math and all that, like you just talked about, the one nice thing about math is you have a discrete, there's a real right answer. Well, you obviously
Mhm.
don't have that in law school.
Yeah, yeah, it's a tough adjustment. Yeah, it's a tough adjustment. Uh, but at least it's like, there's not a right answer, but at least you have rules and you have ways to persuade people that your answer is right. And it's not as subjective as maybe like an English paper. So I
Okay.
did appreciate that about the law. I
Mm.
loved law school. I
Hmm.
really, most people don't have that experience, but
Yeah,
I
right.
really loved it, especially the first couple of years. I think by year 3, I was done.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Not
Well,
necessarily
that's
with law school, but with school. I
yeah.
just, couldn't take another class if you if you paid me. Um, but yeah, I think math really helps with like your logical thinking and your sort of discipline in terms of trying to um, prove things in a way that is sound. Because a
Yeah,
lot of math at an advanced level it's not calculations, it's proofs.
yeah, right.
And so it resembles legal writing in that respect, in that you start with some basic principles or your facts. You start with the, basics of the law, and you have to say, here are the rules. That means this is the way it is. This is the fact here, and that yields this result. And you have to lay it out in a way that each step is unassailable, and then you have convinced somebody, hopefully.
Yeah, yeah. Do you get to use your math and stuff and scientists at all in your practice, or do you practice in an area where that gets used a lot?
I do practice in patent litigation.
Okay.
I would still say that no, it doesn't get used a lot. Occasionally, I had a case a few years ago that involved some low-cost spanning trees in a server network, and that is combinatorics, and it brought me back to 15 years ago. But I don't remember anything from 15 years ago, and I had to relearn it anyway. But
Yeah,
I would say that the thinking process is what really helps.
yeah,
What I
yeah,
described about having to, kind of logically think through all the steps of your proof, which part doesn't make sense. Oh, there's the logical flaw. There's the part of
mm,
your proof that makes
yeah,
the whole thing false.
yeah,
That really, we use on a daily basis. The actual substance of ring theory, no.
Now you said you kind of figured out you wanted to be a litigator. Did you choose IP and patent litigation because of your technical background, or I mean, you could obviously have been a white collar litigator. You could have done commercial litigation. You could have done securities litigation. A million
Yeah,
things.
the short answer is no. I didn't choose IP because of my tech background, and actually, I'm my practice is pretty broad,
Mm.
and always has been. So I do a lot of IP litigation, and I do some patent. I do a lot of software related copyright work.
Oh, okay.
Doing a bunch of AI work, and then general contract disputes and things like that. But I defend law firms,
Oh, okay.
law firm defense cases. I've throughout my practice done some consumer cases, discrimination cases. So what I really like is trials. And one thing that drew me to IP is those cases tend to go to trial more often than, say if you're a class actions attorney.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I really enjoy explaining technology to judges and juries, right?
Yeah.
Because you have this extraordinarily complicated case with complicated facts, complicated technology. And you as the lawyer don't know it when you come to the case. You have to learn it quickly.
Yeah, yeah.
And then when you learn it, you have to then realize, okay, this is what I didn't understand when I was new to this. And so how do I explain that to somebody in 5 minutes?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that's what's really challenging and what I really enjoy about those kinds of cases.
Do you have any hobbies or anything that you can scratch your math itch?
Uh, Gosh, that helps me with math. Yeah. No, my main hobby is play some basketball on the side, and I got 2 kids that I spend a bunch of time with. Helping them with their math homework scratches my match it a little bit, but honestly, math has apparently changed in the last 20 years, because I don't remember doing what they're doing. Yeah, my kids they're in 3rd and 5th grade, but they apparently have new math.
Could you solve a differential equation if I put one in front of you?
No, absolutely not. And I'm not sure. I could have solved it, back when I was in my 20s, but like barely. I remember that class was so hard, and our professor, was anyway. It was a difficult class. I'll just say that.
Do you remember
Yeah.
what div, grad, and curl are? I don't remember what these are, but I remember the book div, grad, and curl. Did you ever have that book in math?
It doesn't ring a bell. I remember the differential equations book was yellow, and I
Okay.
have a little bit of PTSD about it. And I remember the classroom, and I remember where I sat, and I remember the professor, and I remember that everybody else in the room was like a high-level physicist of some kind, or like was going to be,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
that's the main application of differential equations is in waves, and
yeah, yeah.
I didn't really have any interest in waves and didn't know what differential equations were when I signed up for the class. Quickly realized what they were and that I didn't care.
Yeah,
But it was still interesting to just kind of learn about them and go through the
yeah,
exercises.
yeah. So I take it you're pleased with your career choice. I mean, you got to do math in college and then you became a lawyer. It sounds like it was a really good career choice. Would you have, if you go back and do it, would you have done things differently, chosen a different major or anything like that?
I definitely would not have chosen a different major. I loved just, taking the classes that I enjoyed the most. And I loved the kind of the thinking process throughout all of those. Would I do a different career? No, I'm really happy with where I ended up and what I do. It's never boring. I mean, I
Yeah,
love
yeah.
it's similar to math in the sense that like every day is kind of a puzzle for me.
Mm.
And it's especially in litigation, it's sort of like a strategy battle. I was a big chess player when I was a kid.
Mm.
I traveled to competitive chess tournaments all over the country.
Mm.
And I love that aspect of competition and problem solving and sort of competitive problem solving. And my job in complex litigation is essentially that. I mean, I sit there and try and figure out how to win, and somebody else who is equally smart as me is on the other side doing the same thing against me. And
Yeah,
that's,
yeah.
My job day in and day out.
Hopefully
So
that
it's
person,
never boring.
hopefully that person's not quite as smart, but okay.
Hopefully. Yeah, one can only hope.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Casey, this has been a fascinating conversation. I really appreciate your taking the time and sharing your interesting story and background.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me, Richard. I really appreciate it.
This is Richard Hsu and Casey McCracken. Thanks.